Welcome to a story that doesn't ask for your permission, it just walks into the lobby and changes the weather. Have you ever watched an entire office hold its breath at once? Have you ever seen power arrive without an entourage, just a sun and a wheelchair? And tell me, have you ever witnessed the kind of optics that makes boardrooms sweat, while a single act of care makes a building remember it has a heart? Elevator doors slide open with that soft office sigh, and 100 glances tilt like dominoes. A man in a tailored charcoal suit, polished to the edge of perfection, pushes a wheelchair out into the lobby. He's the kind of CEO whose name sits on the glass walls and the earnings calls. Today, though, there's no press, no boardroom applause, just him and the woman in the chair. Her hands tremble slightly in her lap. He keeps one palm steady on the handle, the other hovering near her shoulder as if to catch what he can't control. You know how offices are when something out of routine happens. Every whisper finds a corner, then a corridor. Assistants keep typing, but the keys slow down. Security pretends to look at the monitors. His secretary Grace sees them first. The look on her face is not shock. It's not pity. It's calculation. Then warmth. Like she's rearranging the furniture in her head so she can make room for this moment. "Morning, mister." "Hail," she says, voice low and even. "I took the liberty of clearing your schedule for the first hour. Conference room C is quiet and close. No stairs." He nods once. The CEO mask doesn't crack. He's tall, and there's a precision to everything: the cut of his suit, the angle of his jaw, the trimmed lines of his beard. You can tell he's used to decisions, not surprises. But this isn't a decision. This is a vow he keeps from someplace deeper than a board vote. Grace leads, walking a couple of feet ahead, scanning for obstacles like a seasoned navigator. Folded carpet near the receptionist's desk, the heavy glass door that swings a little too fast. The woman in the chair, his mother, watches the ceiling lights pass above her in bright bars. There's a mural in the lobby with a streak of blue that looks like a river. She smiles at it faintly, the way you smile at a memory that almost arrives but doesn't. Inside conference room C, the world quiets. Frosted glass, a long table that hasn't seen a coffee stain in years. Grace holds the door. He wheels his mother to the head of the table as though it's the most natural throne. "Would you like water, ma'am?" Grace asks. "Please," his mother says, voice delicate and careful, like it's learned to treat each word with respect. Grace pours, sets the glass within easy reach, then places a folded napkin under it, as if cushioning a moment that could spill. The CEO, Damian, to the stock market, Sir, to the board, takes a breath that almost shows. Almost. "Mom, I need to take a few calls. Grace will be with you." His mother pats his hand. "Go do what you do, darling." He leans down. It's not quite a hug, but it's near. Then he's gone. The door sighs shut, and the room reshapes itself around two women. If you've ever kept someone company in a quiet room where the clock won't speak, you know the art Grace practices. She doesn't fill the silence with noise. She warms it. She asks the mother's name, not the name on the medical forms, but the name her friends used before the diagnosis put parentheses around her life. "Margaret." "It's a beautiful name," Grace says. "My grandmother was Margaret." They talk about small, safe things: the hallway mural, the sunlight that hits the carpet like a stripe. With each exchange, Grace maps the contours of what not to ask. How long has it been? What happened? Those are questions the body may answer on its own timetable, and Grace respects timetables that are not the calendar's. Damian's voice filters through the glass now and then, just enough to register urgency, never enough to break the room's gentleness. "Reschedule the investor briefing," he tells someone. "Move the niche segmentation review to next week." The word niche floats through like a foreign coin, left on a table, bright and specific, something he cares about even today. But then his tone softens, almost imperceptibly, when he says, "I'll be in conference C." It's not a warning. It's a boundary he sets for the company and himself. This takes priority. The door opens. He returns sooner than expected. "Everything all right?" he asks his mother. "We were just discussing the color blue," she says, smiling at Grace. It keeps finding us. Grace gets it. Some days the mind keeps color like a promise. We have a piece in the lobby, she explains, painted by a local artist. He said he paints rivers because they remember where they're going even when they bend. That's a good line, Margaret says. I'd like to borrow it. You can keep it, Grace replies. He watches this tiny exchange the way someone watches a bridge they might trust with their weight. Thank you, he says to Grace, and the words are simple but heavy. She nods. She doesn't over-furnish the moment. You would think this is where the day smooths. It doesn't. The building's rhythm sends a new obstacle every 15 minutes. A courier knocks with documents. A facilities manager needs to test the emergency alarm. The board's chair calls twice. Grace filters like a guardian at the gate. She pulls warmth through logistics. We'll sign later, she tells the courier. Please leave them with me. To the facilities manager, we have a sensitive guest on this floor. Can you test alarms after 3? To the chair's assistant, he'll return the call at noon. It's a commitment. When lunch hour approaches, Grace slips out and returns with something soft and manageable. Tomato soup, she says, setting the bowl carefully, and grilled cheese cut into triangles. My grandmother said, triangles make it taste better. Margaret laughs, a light sound that reveals the space a laugh can still find. The soup steam rises. Grace waits, not hovering, but present. She's good at the kind of help that doesn't announce itself. Halfway through the meal, the hallway meter jumps. Voices, a ripple of speculation. Someone from the board has arrived unannounced. You can tell by the handshake that isn't a handshake, more a measuring tool. The door doesn't open, but the air tightens. Damian doesn't flinch. Grace sees the tension roll under his collar like thunder you can't hear yet. I'll handle it, she says. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. She steps into the corridor, intercepts the entourage of polished shoes and visible impatience. Good morning. Grace greets the chair with that mix of respect and resolve that makes powerful people pause. We're accommodating a health-related visit today. Mr. Hale will be available at noon as scheduled. This can't wait, the chair replies. There's a gallery event tonight. Optics matter. Grace doesn't blink. Optics are better when we show we're human. Noon. For the first time, the chair notices the wheelchair through the frosted glass, the ghosted outline of a woman's shoulder. Something like shame passes over his face, so quickly it could be mistaken for annoyance. Fine, he says, but the word is flat as paper. They retreat. Grace lets herself breathe on the turn back to the door. In the conference room, she checks Margaret's cup, then looks to Damian. He holds her eyes a fraction longer than strictly professional. Not gratitude, exactly recognition. If you've ever built walls around your life so high you forget where the door is, this is the part where a stranger finds the handle. Time is strange in rooms like this. It lifts and sinks. They move from soup to stories without changing chairs. Margaret speaks in small, polished pieces, memories with rounded edges, a piano with 2 keys that always stuck, blue paint that stained her thumb for days, a little boy who hid under the table during thunderstorms, counting like thunder could be scheduled if you counted hard enough. Damian listens. That's the part people underestimate about him. They think he's made of decisions, not attention. But he stores her words with the neatness he uses for contracts. When she gets lost mid-sentence, searching for a name or a date, he doesn't correct her. He sits in the silence with her until something gentle resurfaces. Grace watches the way he does this and catalogs it under the word tenderness. It's not the showy kind. It's the architecture kind. Load-bearing. The afternoon brings a complication. A doctor's office calls something about test results and follow-up scheduling. Grace steps into the hall to keep the call private, but not secretive. She scribbles notes in precise loops. When she re-enters, she's already sorted the decisions from the options. There's an opening Thursday at 2, she tells him quietly. I can move the niche partner roundtable to virtual and clear your post-lunch block. I'll handle the confirmations. He nods. Thank you. Of course. Margaret's attention has drifted to the window. A cloud pulls its shadow across the carpet and leaves. She follows it with her eyes, as if it were a sentence she almost remembered. "Would you like to see the mural up close?" Grace asks. "It's only a few feet down." Margaret brightens. "Yes, rivers." They make a small procession. Grace ahead, clearing doors. Damian steering, careful over thresholds. The mural waits at the lobby's spine, all brush and flow, the blue swerving through white and slate. Up close, you can see the texture places where the artist pressed and lifted, where the bristles left a whisper. "Look," Margaret says, and she raises her hand toward a patch where the paint clotted like rain pooled on the road. Grace leans in until her shoulder almost touches Margaret's. "Do you paint?" Grace asks. "I did," Margaret replies, "and then my hands got stubborn." "Stubborn hands?" Grace repeats softly. "They have opinions." "Louder every day," Margaret says, and they all smile, including Damian, who in smiling looks just slightly younger than he did at 9 a.m. Behind them, gossip curls and uncurls like smoke. People are trying not to stare, which is its own kind of staring. A junior analyst forgets to sip his coffee. Two interns whisper, then shush each other. But something else is happening too. The lobby, which on most days is an airport of hurry, slows to notice a river that was always there. Grace catches it, this communal exhale, and thinks, sometimes healing isn't quiet after all. Sometimes it's a room rearranging itself to make space. Before they turn back, a woman in a navy pantsuit approaches HR director, impeccable posture. "Mr. Hale," she says, cautious but kind, "we can arrange a more comfortable space for your mother in the future, a private lounge." Grace feels the question inside the offer. Is this going to be a thing? Is the office going to have to carry what your home and the hospital and the calendar can't? Damian answers without defending himself. "Thank you," he says. "That would be helpful." The HR director nods, relieved to be useful. "I'll coordinate with Grace." He's marking 5 at other time. Grace thanks her and makes a mental list. Seating, lighting, soft blanket, a place where the wheelchair turns easily, a shelf with books that don't mind being read in small pieces. Back in Conference C, there's a call he can't delay any longer. The board chair again. Grace keeps it brief and humane. She stands where Margaret can see her. Sometimes just a face in the corner keeps a room steady. By late afternoon, the day has ache in it. Margaret's shoulders slump. Grace fetches a cushion, fits it behind her lower back with permission. "Better?" she asks. And Margaret's little sigh is answer enough. "Mom," Damian says, kneeling to meet her eyes. "We'll head home soon." We've had an adventure," Margaret says. "I met your river." "You did," he replies. "And it remembered you." Grace gathers her notes, her lists, the cup with the triangle crumbs. She straightens the scattered pieces of their day into something carryable. The lobby prepares to witness their exit, like it witnessed the entrance. This time the stairs are softer, people hold doors. A junior analyst steps aside with an awkward smile that still counts. At the elevator, there's a pause where everything hangs in that little square of mirrors. 3 reflections, 3 different kinds of care. The doors close, and for the first time Damian exhales in a way that's audible. He tips his head against the panel behind him just an inch. "Thank you," he says to Grace without looking up. "You're welcome," she answers. There's no ceremony to it. That makes it more honest. They descend. The lights blink the floors away, each number a small goodbye. When the doors open on the ground floor, Grace goes ahead to clear a path. Outside, the afternoon city folds around them, traffic like a compress, people moving at chosen speeds. A car waits at the curb. The driver, long time discreet, steps out, opens the rear door, lowers the ramp. Grace stands slightly aside, but not so far she can't catch a slipped blanket or a wavering step. Before Margaret is settled, she touches Grace's wrist. It's a quick, feather-light contact that still manages to anchor. You have a caretaker's hands, she says. I had a good teacher, Grace answers. Who? Margaret asks. Everyone who needed me, Grace says, and it is both a deflection and a truth. They arrange the seatbelt, secure the chair, ensure comfort. The ramp tucks away. The door closes with the neatness of habit. From inside the car, Margaret gives a small wave, the kind of wave that says, I see you, more than goodbye. Grace waves back, then steps to the curb as the car pulls into traffic and dissolves into the city's slow, inevitable flow. She stands there a second longer than she needs to, letting the noise wash the day into the place where it will turn into memory. When she goes back inside, the building has resumed its rhythm. Emails breed, phones blink. But people look up when she passes, and some of their glances have gratitude in them they don't know how to name. The HR director gives her a thumbs up from down the hall. The board chair's assistant pretends not to stare. Grace returns to her desk, opens her planner, and starts turning the river into bullet points. Thursday appointment confirmed. Private lounge proposal. Investor brief moved. Niche partner roundtable virtual. Arrange mobility-friendly floor plan. Order kettle and chamomile tea. There's a sketch at the edge of the page she doesn't remember making two curved lines that meet and separate and meet again. She taps the pen against it and smiles at her own unintentional river. In his car, watching the city smear into long bands of color through the glass, Damian lets the day find him. He feels the old panic. What if I can't hold all of this crack just enough for something else to slip through? In the passenger mirror, he can see his mother's face turned toward the window, eyes following a blue billboard as if it's the same river. He thinks about Grace's voice, the way it didn't rise to meet the board's pressure. He thinks about the sentence she pressed into the day without forcing it. Optics are better when we show we're human. He doesn't call it hope. He's superstitious about names. He calls it a plan. A better plan than pretending everything has to happen off stage. If the company can be a place where rivers are allowed to be rivers, maybe he can too. His phone vibrates. A text from Grace. Appointment confirmed for Thursday at 2 p.m. I'll finalize the lounge setup by morning. Do you want me to notify the floor leads? He types back, yes. Discretion, but clarity. Then, after a beat, he adds, thank you for today. The three dots appear, then pause, then return. Always, she replies. And there's a word that does not usually belong in a spreadsheet. A word that belongs to quilts and oaths and things you wrap around people you won't let slip. Always. He pockets the phone. The traffic light changes. The car rolls forward, slipping into a lane that only clears once you decide you belong there. In the morning there will be slides and signatures and a board that wants the story to be neat. For tonight, there is a river mural in a lobby, a secretary making lists that are secretly love letters to competence, a mother who still sees color like it's a promise, and a man learning that some walls don't protect. They imprison. He is not free yet, but a door just opened, and a stranger who maybe isn't a stranger anymore put her hand on the handle and waited until he saw it too. Morning doesn't ask how your night went. It shows up with emails. Grace is at her desk before the building remembers it has lights. She's got a mug that says, Plan A, coffee. Plan B, more coffee, and a notebook open to a fresh page. The first line she writes is not a task. It's a promise. Discretion, but clarity. Below it, bullets spring up like seedlings. Private lounge setup. Floor lead briefing. Thursday appointment logistics. Niche partner roundtable agenda conversion. Investor brief reschedule messaging. Mobility access audit. Tea and blankets. Doorstops for heavy glass. She starts with the space. HR promised a private lounge, but promised is not the same as ready by 9. Grace grabs facilities on chat, not email. Faster, kinder. Grace, need a quiet room today, comfortable seating, easy wheelchair turns, lamp lighting, not overheads. Can we repurpose wellness too? Facilities. Leo, can do. 30 minutes to move furniture. What about a cot? Grace. Not a cot. Armchair with firm support, plus love seat, plus side table, plus soft throw. Kettle. Leo. Kettle? You building a tea room? Grace. I'm building a day that won't break. Leo drops a thumbs up. 10 minutes later, he pings again. We're short on doorstops. Grace has already ordered 2, arrival by 8:45. She keeps a stash of miracles in her Amazon cart, like a stagehand with extra light bulbs. By 7:30, the floor is a choreography of prep. She briefs the front desk quietly. We have a guest today, Mr. Hale's mother. Please direct visitors away from the area unless pre-cleared. She loops in security with the same tone she uses when she negotiates boardroom egos. We want presence without pressure. 1 officer on the far end of the corridor is enough. No clustering near the lounge. There's a gallery event on the calendar for tonight, one of those schmoozy charity things where art meets networking and everyone pretends the canapés are edible. The board cares about optics. Grace hears the word and thinks, optics are glasses. We decide whether to look through them or take them off. She drafts the day's message to the floor leads. Subject. Today's floor plan, plus guest consideration. Body. Team. Quick heads up. We'll be using Wellness 2 as a private lounge today for a family health-related visit. Please minimize noise near Conference C and Wellness 2 between 10 am 2 p.m. If you see anyone congregating near those doors out of curiosity, redirect kindly. No spectacle, just support. Also, we're running the Niche Partner Roundtable virtually at 2:30 p.m. Link to follow. Discretion, but clarity. Thanks for being humans first. Grace. She reads it once, trims a sentence that sounds like a sermon, hits send. Damian arrives at 8:02 with that particular morning focus he wears like a tie. The driver eases the company car to the curb. Damian steps out first, then the ramp hums down, and Margaret appears, bundled in a soft dove-gray cardigan that makes her look like she invented gentle. Good morning, Grace says, stepping forward, not too close. We've got a room ready for you today, couches, tea, a view with a tree in it. Margaret brightens. A tree? An admirable one, Grace says. It's the kind of tree that supervises without intruding. Damian's mouth does that almost smile again. He's carrying an overnight bag like he's ready for contingencies. Grace clocks the bag and thinks, he is learning. He's planned for snacks, meds, sweater, spare charger, folder of in case we need medical records. The folder is the color of good intentions. She relieves him of it with an easy motion and hands it to security for safe storage within reach. They move like a practiced trio now. Grace ahead to clear doors, Damian steering the chair as if the hallways were lanes he designed, Margaret looking around with curious eyes that land on colors first and names later. When they reach Wellness 2, Grace pushes the door open with her shoulder and lets the room introduce itself. It's simple and soft. A love seat with textured blue fabric, an armchair with a firm back, a lamp with a shade that turns light into kindness, a little round table with a kettle, 2 mugs, a cane sugar jar, and a box of chamomile tea whose brand claims to calm the storm. There's a folding screen for privacy if a nurse comes by. There are tissues that don't sandpaper your face. Oh, Margaret says, a pleased little sound. You found Blue again. Blue finds us, Grace says. Damian sets the brake on the wheelchair with that precise click. Thank you, he tells Grace, and today it's not just for the room. It's for the way invisible work can be architecture when you do it like you mean the building to stand. Grace doesn't hover. She checks the kettle, then steps out to run the 9 a.m. Gauntlet Investor Brief Reschedule call. Calendar, Tetris. Pre-read for a procurement item that could nap but refuses to. By 9:15, the building has shaken sleep from its shoulders and taken up its rituals of lanyards and laptops. Grace dials the investor relations lead. We're moving the brief to Friday, she says. Clean messaging. Calendar prioritization, due to family medical coordination. Use those words. No speculation, no color. What about the guidance question? The lead asks. Don't answer what wasn't asked, Grace replies. If they push, we circle back after Friday. Today we're not doing performative transparency. We're doing humane clarity. She clicks off and updates the press office. Her email drafts are scalpel clean. 1 paragraph, 2 lines of gratitude, 1 line of clarity, a link. She writes like she removes obstacles from a runway. Don't let any sentence trip the plane. At 9:40, Damian texts, Mom wants to see the mural again before the doctor calls. Are the corridors clear? Grace, yes. I'll meet you at Wellness 2. When she arrives, Margaret is already angled toward the door, impatient like someone who just remembered there's a world. The river? She asks. The river, Grace confirms. They make the short journey in a silence that isn't empty. The mural is the same and not the same. Morning light changes paint the way time changes stories. Today the blue looks more certain, like it knows its route. Grace stands back while mother and son look. A junior analyst, the coffee forgetter, passes and slows, but this time he doesn't stare. He nods. Grace nods back permission to keep moving. When they return, the doctor's number flashes on Damian's phone. He puts it on speaker at Margaret's suggestion, if I don't understand, you translate. The doctor's voice is clinical with edges of compassion. Test results. Markers. A path forward that is not miraculous but is not grim either. Words like stabilize and monitor and adjust dosage. Margaret listens like a person who has learned to parse comfort from Latin. So, she says, when the call ends, we keep going. We keep going, Damian echoes. Grace takes the notes without looking like she's taking notes. When Margaret glances at her, Grace smiles and taps the page. Just a map, she says. Maps are good. They make unknowns choose a shape. By late morning, the company begins its buzz about the evening's gallery event. An email from the board chair's office hits inboxes with the enthusiasm of a marching band. Tonight we celebrate local artistry and our strategic community presence. Grace reads it and exhales through her nose. There's a suggested talking points attachment. She skims. It's all sunlight and synergy. Damian steps out to take a legal call. Margaret drifts toward the window and the supervising tree. Grace finds herself alone with the talking points document and a pen. She circles one line. We believe in the power of story made visible. She writes, in the margin, then make room for real ones. It's not a note she'll send, it's a reminder for herself. The HR director knocks lightly and peeks in. How's the lounge working? She whispers. Beautifully, Grace answers. Small ask. Can we add a do not disturb sign that's not aggressive, something that communicates care and progress? I'll have design Mach 1, HR says. You're very good at this. Grace smiles. We don't need to be heroes, she says. We just need to be ready. By noon, the floor leads have done their part. The corridor is calmer than a weekday deserves. People have found other routes that add 30 seconds to their walk and subtract a pound from their conscience. Grace texts the driver to be on standby for a mid-afternoon break if Margaret needs it. Lunch is simple again, soup and sandwich. This time, chicken noodle. Because the day calls for archetypes. Margaret eats slowly. Grace tells a story about her grandmother teaching her how to fold linens so they stack like good decisions. If you do the corner right, the whole thing behaves, she says, demonstrating with an invisible sheet. Margaret tries the motion with her hands. They tremble, then steady, then tremble again. Your grandmother must have been a force, Damian says when he returns. She was 5 feet and infinite, Grace replies. Margaret makes a satisfied, I like her already. At 1:30, a problem winds itself into the day with the precision of a clock. The board chair's assistant appears, polite as a polished doorknob. Mr. Hale, she says, the chair requests a brief pre-event alignment call at 2 sharp. Grace steps forward gently. We have a health coordination window then, she says. We can offer 2:15, 10 minutes, or send prepared remarks by email. The assistant hesitates. You can see the calculus on her face. The chair doesn't like being offered alternatives that are not his idea. I'll check, she says. It's not defeat. It's the kind of retreat that keeps dignity intact. Grace turns to Damian. We can prep a short set what you will say if asked directly about your mother's presence at the office. He nods. 2 sentences. Plain. She drafts. Family is not a scheduling error, it's a priority. We're lucky to have a workplace that understands care as part of the job. He reads it, makes a minimal edit, changes lucky to proud, because luck happens to you and pride is something you choose. Grace approves the change with a small incline of her head. Language matters. 2 o'clock arrives and, with it, the niche partner roundtable, now virtual. Grace has stacked the prep so it fits like Tetris link sent, deck trimmed to essentials, facilitator briefed to keep it crisp. She ferries Damian to Conference C, ensures Margaret is settled with tea and the supervising tree, then switches into meeting mode in a way that would make a pit crew jealous. The round table runs like a clean river, no eddies, no debris. They talk segmentation, long-tail communities, creator partnerships that don't feel extractive. Damian is present but not performative. He asks one question that makes the vendor earn their fee, then thanks them in a tone that lands like a handshake you remember. Grace watches the chat ping, thanks all, great clarity, and thinks of how quiet competence never trends, but it sustains. Between calls, there's a moment where the day rests its chin in its hands and looks at Grace like, so, what else? She uses it to walk the mobility route from the lounge to the main elevator, checking for rugs that curl and corners that snag. She leaves a post-it near a problem threshold. Mind the lip here, temporary ramp ordered. On her way back, she passes 2 interns, whispering friendly curiosity, not cruel. One of them, the one with earnest eyebrows, asks, "Is it true Mr. Hale might bring his mom to the gallery? The piece tonight is about memory, right?" Grace pauses. She could say, "None of your business," but these are the people who will build the next version of this place. She chooses a middle path. If she does, we'll make sure it's a night that welcomes her. And yes, the piece is about remembering in public. Keep your eyes open. It might change the way you walk past art. They beam like she handed them a VIP pass to humanity. At 3:30, Margaret wants to rest. Grace adjusts the love seat pillows with the calibrated tenderness of someone who understands how comfort is architecture too. Damian kneels again, eye level. "We can skip tonight," he tells his mother. "Do you want to?" she asks. He thinks. You can see him actually doing it, the CEO stopping the reflex to decide fast, choosing instead to feel slow. "I want to do what won't turn us into a secret," he says. Margaret smiles. "Then wear your good suit," she says. "The midnight one. I like the way it tells the truth." Grace files that under preferences that matter. She taps her planner midnight suit, fresh boutonniere, car route with fewer potholes. She texts the driver to choose the smoother path even if it adds 5 minutes. She messages the gallery contact to confirm ADA access and lighting that flatters real people, not mannequins. As the afternoon stretches, a small memory surfaces and insists. Grace goes to the supply closet and returns with a simple black shawl. "For later," she tells Margaret, "in case the gallery air conditioning is over-enthusiastic." "Air conditioning," Margaret says, tasting the word like it's a lemon candy. "It does like to show off." They laugh. Even Damian does, and it unknots a corner only he knew was tight. At 5, the building changes clothes. People swap sneakers for shoes that make noise. The air fills with fragrance and the anticipatory hum of an evening that wants to collect compliments. Grace confirms the "Care in Progress" sign is on the lounge door, soft typography. No capital letters that shout. She checks the kettle, the batteries in the lamp, the calm in the room. Then she goes to her desk and opens her bottom drawer. Inside is an emergency kit, labeled not with a label maker, but with a Sharpie and a sense of humor, in case of humanity. It has Band-Aids, the good kind, mints, a sewing needle, safety pins, a phone charger, octopus, blisters, pads, and a tiny bottle of lavender oil her grandmother swore could calm ghosts. She takes the lavender and the mints. She hesitates, then adds a small pack of tissues to her bag. Insurance against the kind of art that puts its hand on your throat and doesn't let go until you admit why. The board chair appears near the elevator, flanked by two directors who always look like they're headed to or from a deposition. He slows when he sees Grace. "Miss Park," he says, a crisp nod. "We'll see you at the gallery." Mr. Hale has the talking points. "He has a voice," Grace says, pleasantly. The chair's mouth twitches toward a smile and lands somewhere near tolerance. "Indeed," he says. "Let's hope it behaves." Grace thinks of rivers and what they do to rock. Out loud, she says, "At 6, the car is ready." The driver has placed a non-slip mat where the chair wheels meet the ramp, has a small step stool in case the lip is too high. Grace walks out with them. She's not officially attending the gallery. Assistants don't have to be seen to be essential, but she'll be there. If a day writes itself across a city, she tends the commas. Margaret wears the black shawl. Damian wears the midnight suit. The route is smooth. The gallery sits in a renovated brick building that used to be a factory. The kind of place that thinks redemption is an aesthetic. Outside, a cluster of flashbulbs pops like carbonation. Grace texts the gallery manager. "We're here. Quiet entrance?" The reply. "Side door, lit softly, 2 steps, then ramp. I'll meet you." They use the side door. The manager, a woman with shoes that say she likes to stand comfortably while making bold statements, greets them with genuine welcome. "We're honored," she tells Margaret. "There's a bench by the piece. We reserved it." Inside, the crowd is a language. People cluster, disperse, cluster again. The piece they've all come to see is not modest, and it doesn't apologize. It's a large canvas, layered with blues from river to bruise, with whites that are not snow but breath, and charcoal lines that are almost letters but not quite the suggestion of names. In the lower right, under a glaze that catches the light like memory catches on a scent, a simple handprint. Small, not child small, but care small, the size of a hand that knows the weight of a face. Grace feels the room do the thing rooms do when they recognize they're inside a moment they'll tell later. The air folds into attention. She spots a bench, a simple one, blessedly without artful angles. The manager leads them to it. Margaret sits. She is quiet for a long time, the soft kind of long that isn't absence, it's arrival. "Do you see the names?" she asks finally, to no one and everyone. Damian crouches again, tuxedoed knees bending under a kind of devotion that would embarrass him if anyone said the word devotion out loud. "I see them," he says, "even the ones that aren't finished." Grace stands a step behind, anchoring the space with presence, not direction. Around them, the board chair and his 2 directors hover at the respectful distance of people who know their influence has limits. The chair's eyes soften despite themselves. Optics morph into witness. A reporter edges close, pen ready, manners trying to keep up with hunger. "Mr. Hale," she begins, "could you comment on—" Grace moves, a gentle intercept. "We'll have a statement after the tour," she says. "Tonight is for the art." She glances at the reporter's shoes, sensible, and at her eyes, curious, not predatory. "You'll get your quote," she adds, and because she says it like a promise one makes to a neighbor, the reporter steps back, grateful. Margaret lifts her hand and, for a second, aligns it with the handprint on the canvas, her fingers hovering above the paint like a benediction that never touches. "Stubborn hands," she whispers, thinking of the way her fingers shake and pause and insist. Grace feels the sting behind her eyes and does not blink until it's safe. The artist approaches. He's younger than the piece, which is a compliment. He has the shy, bold posture of someone who believes in his work but not in the microphones pointed at it. "Thank you for coming," he says to Margaret, "not to the room. This is for people who remember in circles, not in straight lines." Margaret smiles. "I like circles," she says. "You get to see the same things differently." The board chair clears his throat softly, seeking a seam to insert tonight's strategic community presence. Damian stands, squares his shoulders, and chooses river over rock. He speaks to the small cluster, not the whole room. Grace knows he could command the whole room, but intimacy is the more dangerous courage. "Family isn't a scheduling error," he says, voice steady. "It's a priority. We're proud to work in a place that understands care as part of the job. Art like this reminds us that what we make public should be true, not just polished." Silence, then the kind of applause that feels like an exhale. The chair looks at Grace and, for the first time, she sees not resistance, but recalibration. He nods not to concede, but to learn. It's a start. The rest of the evening unwinds gracefully. People stop performing long enough to mean things. Grace notices little mercies. A stranger offering a seat without fanfare. A bartender setting a glass of water at the edge of the bench unasked. A curator lowering the music in the back rooms because someone might need the quiet. At one point, Margaret leans back and closes her eyes. Grace kneels, yes. In the nice dress, yes. In the shoes that weren't made for kneeling, and whispers, "Do you want to go?" "Not yet," Margaret says. "The blue is still moving." Grace laughs softly. "We can give it a minute. When it is time, the exit is as gentle as the entrance." The crowd parts in that way that makes you believe crowds can be kind. Outside, the night has folded the city into a softer version of itself. The driver has the ramp ready. Grace steadies the shawl. Damian steadies everything else. Before she settles into the car, Margaret looks at Grace and says, with a mischievous little light that wasn't there this afternoon, "You should paint." Grace blinks. "Me? You arrange the world," Margaret says. "That's painting." Grace huffs a surprised breath that might be a laugh or might be relief. "I do like color coding," she offers. "See?" Margaret replies, satisfied as if she's just solved a small private puzzle. The car door closes, the ramp folds. Grace stands on the sidewalk for a second longer, like last time, because sometimes you need to let a night finish speaking before you turn your back on it. Her phone buzzes. A text from Damian. "Thank you, for today, for tonight." A second follows before she can reply. "I meant what I said. We won't be a secret." She types, "Good. Secrets make people smaller. You're building something large enough for rivers." She hits send, feels reckless and right. Back in her apartment later, she will hang her blazer on the back of a chair, rinse the gallery air from her hair, and sit in front of a blank page that is not a work notebook. She will draw two curved lines that meet and separate and meet again, her accidental river, grown deliberate. She will not call it painting, not yet. She will call it arranging the world until it looks like hope. But for now, at the curb outside a gallery that has remembered how to be a room for truth, Grace pockets her phone, squares her shoulders, and heads back inside to collect the last small things forgotten. Scarf, signed program, for a stranger who asked, sweetly, a post-it with a note to herself, order more doorstops. You can't have too many ways to keep doors open. The morning after big nights always feels like a stage the crew hasn't cleaned yet. Confetti in the corners, spotlights, still a little warm. The inbox is a chorus of, last night was beautiful, and quick follow-up, and could we capitalize on the momentum? The word capitalize makes Grace's molars clench. She sips coffee and types slower than usual, forcing the day to align with the right verbs. Damian is in earlier than anyone expects a CEO to be, which at this company means 8:15. He moves like a man who solved a small math problem and immediately found a larger one under it. He texts Grace from the lobby. Elevator. With Mom. Same route? Grace. Same river. Wellness 2 is ready. She heads out to meet them. Margaret wears the shawl again because the morning remembers how to be chilly. The supervising tree outside, Wellness 2 is busy with small birds that don't care about calendars. Grace holds the door. Damian sets the brake, and the room receives them like it remembers their shape. "How's the blue today?" Margaret asks without preamble. "Brighter," Grace says. "We got good light." Grace sets water boiling, checks the chair cushions, refills the tissue box, straightens the blanket, because straightening is a language here. Damian leans against the door frame for a second, like he's testing whether it will hold him. He catches Grace's look and shakes his head almost fondly, almost tired. "We made it through," he says. "We did more than that," Grace replies. He lets that sit. He's learning how to not talk a moment to death. By 9, small ripples from the gallery have turned into bigger waves. The local paper's culture section ran a photo that catches the exact instant Margaret held her hand over the handprint, fingers hovering, not touching, and the headline somehow manages to be human. A couple of investor emails quietly say, "Thank you." One from a junior engineer reads, "My dad has appointments on Thursdays. Seeing you both last night, I don't have words. But thank you." Grace forwards that one to Damian with no comment because some messages don't need framing. She drafts a simple company-wide note, no brand voice, just voice. "Team, you may see articles about last night's gallery event circulating today. If those remind you of the people you care for, parents, kids, neighbors, friends, we see you. The quiet rooms, Wellness 1 and 2, are available. If you need time during the day to manage care, talk to your lead. We'll be flexible. We're building policies to make that easier, and we'll share soon. Discretion, but clarity." Grace, for Damian. She brings it to Damian for approval. He reads, nods, then reaches for her laptop and adds a line. "P.S. Family isn't a scheduling error. If someone ever makes you feel it is, send them my way." Grace raises an eyebrow. "That's an invitation." "It's a filter," he says. "Let the wrong behavior collect where I can see it." She hits send. She can feel the building soften by a degree, like someone adjusted the thermostat from performance to presence. The board chair is less softened. He calls at 9:30 with the voice of a man who started his morning with headlines and a desire to steer them. Grace routes the call to Conference C and joins Damian, both because she's the buffer and because she's the witness. "Last night," the chair begins, "was compelling." He says compelling like it's a compliment he had to fill out a form to issue. Some donors expressed concern about the message. They support family values, of course, but they don't want to see the company politicize personal matters. Damian doesn't flinch. "We didn't politicize anything," he says. "We told the truth about care." "Yes, well," the chair replies, "truth is increasingly political, as you know." "There's an easy way to avoid controversy," Damian says. "Hide. We're not doing that." The chair sighs, which on him sounds like a leather chair settling. "Going forward, optically, I'd like alignment before public statements at events. I will do ning." Grace leans just enough toward the speaker to be heard. "If you're asking for talking points before we tell the truth, that's a mismatch of tools." A pause. The chair resets his tone to something resembling collegiality. "No one is against truth, Miss Park. We just like it staged." "Truth that's staged forgets to breathe," Grace says, and then stops. She could keep going. She doesn't. She learns fast. Damian ends it clean. "We'll be publishing a caregiver policy this quarter," he says. "I'll send you the draft." "Fine," the chair says, which in chair speak means I'll try to stop this with notes later. They click off. Damian leans back. "We just invited a fight." "I don't." He take to goin'. "We invited clarity," Grace counters. "Fights show up as +1s." He smiles, tired and amused. "Add caregiver policy draft framework to the agenda," he says. "Already did." She flips her notebook so he can see. There it is, underlined once, which is how she tells the future what to do. At 10, something small and sharp happens. Margaret misplaces a name hers. She looks at Grace and says, with perfect calm, "I think I left my name somewhere I will eventually revisit." She laughs a little. but her eyes go wobbly. Grace kneels. Not because Margaret is fragile, but because knowing where to put your body is a skill. That happens to me, too, she says. What does it sound like today, your name? Margaret tilts her head. Sometimes it's Margaret. Sometimes I'm sure I was a Lily. Sometimes Emily visits, but she leaves quickly. Grace doesn't flinch. It's all you, she says. We can choose whichever one wants tea. Tea, Margaret decides. Tea wants tea. Damian watches, hands immobile at his sides, as if moving might break something delicate. There's worry on his face, and love on top of it, like a glaze that doesn't hide the clay. Grace looks up at him. Do you want to call Dr. Santos? She asks softly. He shakes his head. Not yet, she said. Names wander. He breathes. We knew this road. We did, Grace says. We still do. He. Hoard. The kettle clicks off. Grace pours. She slides the cup into Margaret's hands with a small weight so it reminds the body where it is. They sit with the tea until the syllables settle. After a while, Margaret whispers, Margaret, like a wave touching shore again. It lands. 11 shines through the blinds like it has nothing to do with any of this. Grace turns the day toward building. If they're going to publish a caregiver policy, it will not be a paragraph in a handbook that asks for mercy and gives permission for guilt. It will be architecture. She opens a new document and titles it, Care Out Loud. Then she drafts sections. Flexible windows. 2 two-hour windows per week for care coordination. No questions beyond scheduling. Quiet rooms. Wellness 1 and 2 bookable for any employee supporting a family member. Chosen family included. Emergency protocol. Same-day coverage plans. Handoff templates so no one has to perform miracles alone. Manager training. How to receive care disclosures without demanding medical theater. Language guide. Stop calling it special circumstances. Call it life. She writes like she's customizing a life raft that also looks good in a hallway. She writes examples because people understand through scenes. Example. I need to step out 1:03 p.m. to take my father to an appointment. I'll hand off the 2 p.m. vendor call to Maya and catch up async. Manager response. Thanks for the heads up. Do you want me to sit in on 2 p.m. so Maya has backup? She sends the rough draft to HR with the subject line, First pass build on this. Cut what's soft, keep what's human. The HR director replies in 9 minutes, I've never wanted to cry at a policy before. In a good way, let's ship this properly. At noon, the building remembers it has stomachs. Grace brings soup again. Today it's potato leek, the universal balm, and sandwiches cut into triangles because ritual is a form of medicine. Margaret eats better today. Between bites, she looks at Grace's notebook. What is that? She asks. A map, Grace says. Of the afternoon. Margaret nods. You'd be a good painter. Your campaign continues, Grace says, smiling. I have high resistance, but low immunity. Damian sips soup like a person who forgot soup could qualify as a meal. We need to talk about the names, he says, quiet. Grace looks at him. Do you want to do that now? He glances at Margaret, who's watching the supervising tree pretend to be busy. Maybe after she rests. He's in smyrie aldem the redeser, he say obstarted is. She can hear you, Margaret says without turning, but you can still talk. Grace meets her where she is. Sometimes names are heavy, she says. We can carry them together. There's a pause that feels like a door where no one is sure which way to turn the handle. Then Margaret says, very simply, I had a sister. Damian's spoon stops halfway to the bowl and returns, empty. A sister? He echoes. She took my names, Margaret says, or I gave them to her. We traded a lot, bracelets, blouses, boyfriends. She grins, wicked and young for a blink. We were terrible and wonderful. She got sick first. I got brave first. Neither of those lasted. Grace doesn't ask for dates or diagnoses. She waits for the memory to choose its own shape. Margaret reaches into the air like she's feeling for a shape she can't see. Sometimes, she continues, when my hands are stubborn, I think they're hers. And when a name arrives, I try it on to see if it breathes. She looks down at her hands. They tremble, then rest. Today I'm Margaret, but if Lily shows up, we'll set a place for her. Damian blinks. Grace chooses a sentence that doesn't break the moment. We can make name cards, she says. We can make a little sign for the kettle, tea for whatever name arrives. Margaret laughs and wipes at her eyes with the tissue. Grace nudged closer without comment. Yes, she says. Make the sign blue. After lunch, Damian has a one-on-one with a senior product lead who believes in velocity like religion. Grace joins because velocity is the kind of religion that needs translators. The lead wants to accelerate a launch. Grace wants to check if the users have enough oxygen. Damian splits the difference like someone who knows pain and progress both belong in a plan. We'll run a smaller cohort, he says. Not because we're timid, because we're smart. He defers to Grace on the comm strategy because last night taught him what he already suspected. She knows how to make a crowd into a room. At 2, an email arrives from the culture editor who had the kind eyes. It's a request for a short quote to accompany a longer piece about the gallery and caregiving at work. Grace drafts. We don't make room for care at work as a favor. We do it because people build better things when they aren't pretending to be smaller than they are. Damian Hale. Damian changes nothing. Sometimes exactly that is the edit. At 2:30, Margaret naps. Grace dims the lamp and puts her phone on Do Not Disturb for everyone except the 4 people who can breach. Damian, Dr. Santos, the driver, and facilities, because doorstops. The room holds its breath in a good way, like an audience during a perfect monologue. Grace uses the quiet to walk down to the lobby mural alone. She stands closer than last time, until the blue fills her peripheral vision and the charcoal almost letters look like the things you write at 3 a.m. and then hide. She pulls out her phone and snaps a photo, not for social, not for proof, just to carry a piece of the river when she's in rooms that forget water exists. When she returns, Damian is at the door with a look that means 2 things are true at once. HR loves the policy, he says. The chair, less so. Which one wins? Grace asks. The one that outlasts headlines, he says. Ours. She nods. She's not sentimental about policies. She's practical about them. If you write them in a way that lets people breathe, they don't have to ask permission to be human every Tuesday. 3 o'clock brings an unexpected visitor. A woman in a floral blouse with a badge that reads, Janitorial Maria. She hovers in the doorway with a question in her hands like it might spill. Miss Grace, she says. Every facilities person calls Grace Miss. Grace, which she has tried and failed to correct because some respect refuses downgrade. I see the sign. Care in progress. My mother, she lives with me. Sometimes I need to talk to the doctor in the hallway because the machines are loud. It is okay if I use the room when he is not here. In quaint. Grace feels something warm and heavy tilt behind her sternum. Yes, she says. Please, that's exactly what it's for. I'll add you to the calendar. You can block it like anyone else. And if you ever need me to sit for 5 minutes while you take a call, I've got a chair and a clock. Maria's eyes do the shiny thing. She nods fast and backs away because kindness can be a tidal wave if you're not braced for it. Grace makes a note to translate the policy into Spanish and to print a version that doesn't look like a courtroom document. At 3:30, a hiccup. The fire alarm decides to test its lungs. It's due for a monthly check. Grace tried to reschedule yesterday, but bureaucracy moves in months, not minutes. The siren blares once meanly. Margaret startles awake, panic sparking, hands flitting like birds who've never learned the window's outline. Damian's face goes white around the edges. Grace moves like a human fire blanket. She leans in close, voice low enough to cut under the siren. It's a test, she says. 3 seconds. 1, 2. She holds up fingers. She counts slowly, like thunder that agrees to wait. 3. The alarm stops. Technology remembers itself. Margaret's breath catches and then resumes, too fast, then slower. Grace keeps her hand hovering just above Margaret's forearm, not a touch that could jolt, a presence that could anchor. "Stubborn machines," Margaret says, defiant and breathy. "Opinions," Grace replies. "Loud ones." Damian exhales. He looks at Grace like you look at a person who just rerouted a storm. "I owe you a building," he says in a voice too soft to be a joke. "I'll take a better calendar," she answers. They both smile, because some truths are best disguised as light. At 4, the day gives them a gift. 20 minutes of nothing scheduled. Grace uses it to sit with Margaret and talk about art not as metaphor, but as paint. "What did you like to paint?" she asks. "Hands," Margaret says. "And rivers. Sometimes hands in rivers. My sister used to tease me. Did you run out of faces? But hands tell the truth better than faces do. Faces learn to lie." Grace looks at her own hands. They are small and capable, nicked in places that haven't faded. "I arrange things," she says. "Lists, rooms, hours. I think maybe that's painting with furniture and time." "It is," Margaret says. "And you use blue well." At 4:30, Grace opens a fresh document and titles it, "The River Rule Book, Working Draft." It's not for the company, it's for herself. Rules like 1. If you have to choose between speed and kindness, choose the one that lets someone breathe. 2. Count out loud when alarms sound. It makes time behave. 3. Carry tissues that don't scratch. 4. Keep a blue object in sight. Rivers help. 5. When someone forgets a name, give them more than one to choose from. She doesn't know yet if she'll show it to anyone. Sometimes the rules are just to make your hands feel less stubborn. At 5, the email's slow, and the building stretches like a dog waking up from the wrong nap. Grace starts to pack up the day into containers with labels. Done. Later. Noticing. She reviews tomorrow's Shape Doctor. Santos at 9. Product Sync at 10:30. HR at 2 to sculpt the policy into legal but not lethal language. She writes the policy's opening sentence by hand, because handwriting comes from a different part of your honesty. We do not whisper care here. Before she leaves, she checks on Wellness 2. Margaret is dozing again, the shawl pulled up to her chin. Damian sits by the lamp with a stack of emails open and ignored. He looks over when Grace enters. "How's your river?" he asks. "Learning new curves," she says. "I made a rule book." "Of course you did," he says. "May I see it when it's ready?" "Maybe," she says. "Depends if it behaves." He nods toward his phone. "The chair sent a note. Appreciated your remarks. Let's align earlier next time." "And?" Including. "And I told him alignment is best when it's about values, not sentences." Grace mimes a slow clap. "He'll hate that." "He will," Damian agrees. "He'll live." They sit in a soft triangle of lamplight and hum. Grace thinks about how strange it is that a day can be full of alarms and gallery flashbulbs, and still the moment that winches your heart is a kettle clicking and someone remembering their name after it wandered. "Do you need anything before I go?" she asks. "Tell me we're not making a mistake," he says, which is the most human request he's made yet. Grace thinks, then answers the only way that doesn't cheapen things. "We're making a choice," she says. "If it's a mistake, we'll make a different choice. But this one fits the size of our lives." He breathes, and it looks like relief standing on tiptoe. She turns to go and then stops. "One more thing," she says, hand on the door. "If Lily shows up tomorrow, I'll bring a blue name card." He smiles in a way that's all the way, not almost. "She'd like that," he says. Grace leaves the building as the sky washes itself in the colors galleries try to imitate. The mural in the lobby catches a last stripe of late sun and throws it at the floor like a dare. She takes the dare home. At her kitchen table, she opens the blank page that has been waiting and draws 2 lines, then another, then a hand, hovering just above them. She colors the hand in with nothing. She leaves it hovering. It feels right. Her phone pings. A text from Maria. "Thank you for the room. My mother likes chamomile." I tell her Miss Grace say hello. She says hello back. A second text from the junior engineer. "I used the word caregiver out loud to my manager today. He didn't flinch." That felt like a new hallway. And one from Damian, time-stamped 5 minutes ago. Policy line edit. "We do not whisper care here, should be bold." She replies. Bold it is. Then she adds a final line to her rulebook before bed. 6. Make the quiet things big on purpose. Tomorrow will arrive like a stage again. There will be meetings and timelines and a board that thinks truth should apply for a permit. There will be doctors who speak in markers and sisters who borrow names. There will be doorstops holding open thresholds that used to slam. And there will be a kettle and a shawl and a blue that remembers what it's for. For now, Grace caps her pen. She rinses her mug. She doesn't pray, not exactly, but she hopes very specifically for rooms that hold, for rivers that keep their appointment with the sea, for hands that learn new ways to be stubborn in the direction of care. Dawn comes dressed like an email, brief, necessary, with attachments. Grace is up before it, sitting at her kitchen table with a pen that writes like it knows where it's going. She bolds the line on her handwritten policy draft. "We do not whisper care here," then underlines it once, which is her way of telling words to behave. She tucks the page into a folder labeled in block letters, "Care Loud." The folder joins her bag next to the emergency kit and the lavender that her grandmother said could quiet rooms that didn't realize they were shouting. At the office, the building has that Wednesdays remember themselves energy, too far from Monday to blame inertia, too close to Friday to pretend there's no time. Wellness, too, is dim and waiting. Grace boils water, checks that the lamp bulbs are warm-toned, no hospital light, and places 2 blue name cards on the side table, Margaret and, in the same neat hand, Lily. The third card, Emily. She leaves blank on the reverse so it can arrive if it wants to. At 8:50, the elevator sighs open. Damian is in a slate suit that tells the truth without italics. Margaret wears the shawl and the determined little smile of a woman who has promised to be somewhere at 9 and plans to be on time even if time itself is slippery. "Good morning," Grace says, stepping to the side so she's not in the way of the ramp, not in the way of the chair, not in the way of the day. "Morning," Damian replies, and the corners of his eyes do that crinkle that looks like he slept some but not enough. Margaret peers past Grace into the lounge. Her gaze lands on the name cards. "Oh," she says, and the word is equal parts surprise and relief. "You saved us seats." Grace smiles. "Blue seats." Dr. Santos calls at 9 sharp. Her voice, as always, carries the calm of a person who understands that medical facts can be delivered like spoons or like stones. She chooses spoons. They go over test results, medication adjustments, a new occupational therapy routine for hands that would like to remember more than they currently do. Words like dosage and vitamins and dexterity tasks stitch themselves into a plan. "I'll email exercises you can do together," Dr. Santos says. "Softball squeezes, coin sorting, button boards. Hands need jobs." "Mine like important jobs," Margaret says, wry. "They were very bored during the symphonies I used to play with my sister's boyfriend." Grace raises her eyebrows. Damian pretends he didn't hear the word boyfriend attached to sister and symphonies. Dr. Santos laughs, which is the optimal outcome for that sentence. "Start with the softball," the doctor says. "We'll build from there." They end with a small plan, the kind that makes big plans possible. Grace writes it cleanly and copies the key parts onto a sticky note shaped like a leaf, because sometimes the form helps the content remember to live. At 9:20, as if invoked by the word dexterity, Facilities sends up a little basket. Foam balls, a button board, a stack of large bead necklaces that can be dismantled and rethreaded. Leo from facilities has a sense of humor. The note says, "For stubborn hands with excellent taste." L. Margaret laughs, yanks a bead off with triumphant flair, and begins to rebuild a necklace that looks like it was designed by a river with opinions. Grace uses the good minutes to check her own map. 10:30 product sync. 11:15 vendor sanity check. 2 HR policy workshop. She texts the driver about a potential late afternoon appointment Thursday and gets a thumbs up and a route suggestion that avoids the street with the pothole that eats small cars. At 10:15, she escorts Damian to the product sync. The lead with Velocity Religion is already there with a deck that could double as a strobe light. Grace takes a seat with her notebook open to a page titled, "What Users Need More Than Speed." She doesn't fight the lead. She asks better questions. "We're accelerating this because the cohort signals are promising," the lead says. "Engagement is sticky, and the niche creators are swept." "Sticky is good," Grace replies. "Do we know if the stickiness is preference or absence of options? If we add an option to save drafts for longer, do we lose the same people or keep them differently?" The lead hesitates, which means no one has asked that question yet. Damian tilts his head toward Grace, as if to say, "Keep going." "We also need a pathway for creators whose care responsibilities interrupt their cycles," Grace adds. "Paused drafts should hold their place for a week without penalty. If someone's mom is in the ER, their engagement shouldn't expire while they're counting breaths instead of views." The lead nods slowly. "We can do that," they say, and it sounds like discovery, not defeat. Damian summarizes, "Ship the cohort. Keep a draft shelf for a week. Add a banner in the creator dashboard that says, 'We'll hold your place.' Make the feature feel like a person, not a countdown clock." Grace writes the sentence down because it deserves to exist beyond air. After the sync, a vendor calls to ask for a quick pulse check on brand integrations at the gallery. "We'd love to leverage the momentum," the vendor says, and Grace can feel her jaw try to clench again. "Let's not leverage anything," she says pleasantly. "Let's steward it. If we mention last night, it'll be to highlight the policy we're building, not to add a logo to a moment that wasn't about logos." The vendor backpedals with the grace of someone used to slippery floors. Of course, steward, love that word. She hears keys clack as they retitle their slide. Stewardship plan. By lunchtime, Margaret has created 3 necklaces, one with alternating blue and white, one with blue heavy on purpose, and one that refuses symmetry and thus feels truer. Grace brings soup and 2 kinds of bread, because life is better with choices that aren't dramatic. They eat in a quiet that has earned itself. "Tell me about the tree," Margaret says suddenly, pointing to the window where the supervising tree is mid-meeting with the wind. Grace considers. "It has boundaries," she says. "It says no to the sidewalk when the sidewalk crowds, but yes to birds without RSVP. In spring, it does pink, like it invented tender. In winter, it edits to essentials. He has saber." "You talk like a painter," Margaret says. "I talk like a secretary," Grace answers. "We're both arrangers." Damian returns mid-soup with an email on his face. You can tell the kind of email by the way it sits on him. This one has bullet points and caveats, and the word reputation misused twice. "The chair sent notes on the caregiver policy draft," he says. "Let me guess," Grace replies. "He likes the part where we say we value families and wants to strike anything that costs money." "Close," Damian says, taking the offered spoon, not to eat but to hold like a pen. He wants clarity on acceptable use for the quiet rooms. No naps, no extended occupancy. He also wants to add a phrase about discretion advised to avoid workplace discomfort. Grace's face does a thing that would be a wince if she wasn't trained. "Discomfort is what happens when empathy wakes up a muscle you haven't trained," she says. "We're not protecting people from that." "We can compromise on naps," Damian says. "We can't compromise on the right to exist." Grace flips open her notebook and writes a sentence that could be a headline or a manifesto, depending on the font. We do not police tenderness. Margaret taps the lily card with one finger, thinking, make the rules for people who never ask for too much, she says, and you'll be safe enough for those who do. It have to slate her, who have to read her. Grace looks at her like you look at a window that just became a door. That's going in the policy, she says, and writes it down intact. No edits. At 1:45, HR pings, we're in a conference room with colored pens and too much ambition. Bring your sentences. Grace grabs the folder and kisses the top of it with the lavender bottle because rituals help. She turns to Margaret. I'll be back before the kettle misses me, she says. Leo's on call if you need the soft ramp. Damian's 2 doors down if you need the hard one. Margaret salutes with a bead necklace. Tell them to keep the blue. The policy workshop looks like a craft store collided with a courtroom, and they both survived. The HR director has printed Grace's draft on large paper and taped it to the wall. Someone has drawn a river down the side in dry erase marker. The legal counsel sits with a stack of Post-its and a face that looks like it was told as a child to use caution. There's coffee, and mercifully, there are cookies. Let's start with the loud line, HR says, tapping. We do not whisper care here. Is that a section header or a thesis? A drumbeat, Grace says. It should appear more than once, at the top, and again, where people most want to hide. Legal clears their throat gently. It's unusual. It's accurate, Grace replies. Accurate is our favorite unusual. They move through sections. Flexible windows becomes care windows, because flexibility implies bending until you snap. Emergency protocol becomes handoff playbook, with templates you can fill in without making a TED Talk out of your crisis. The language guide grows teeth. No special accommodations patronizing. No leave to attend to private matters shaming. Yes to care coordination. Yes to family, including chosen family. Legal wants an acceptable use paragraph for the quiet rooms. Grace doesn't fight the existence of it. She fights the assumptions inside it. They settle on a sentence that reads like a boundary with a welcome mat. Quiet rooms are for rest, calls, caregiving tasks, and being human for a minute. They are not long-term workspaces. The nap question resolves itself with a shrug toward reality. Short naps are allowed. Grace underlines short once and refuses to define it in minutes. Trust is part of architecture. HR suggests a pilot. Grace suggests not calling it a pilot because pilots crash. Call it Phase 1, she says. Then our success metric isn't, did we avoid failure, but what did we learn? And for more. They add Margaret's sentence near the front, in italics. Make the rules for people who never ask for too much, and you'll be safe enough for those who do. Legal looks at it like a philosopher just wandered into a spreadsheet. Then Legal nods, because the sentence is sturdy. 2 hours later, the policy looks like it grew ribs and a heart at the same time. HR prints a clean draft. Legal promises to do a pass that doesn't remove the soul. Grace writes the comms plan on the whiteboard in 4 lines. 1. Company-wide note. Plain voice, not brand voice. 2. Manager training invite role-playing that isn't cringy. 3. Door signs and room booking instructions, no euphemisms. 4. External post-light touch. Values forward, no halos. HR stares at the board and says, "Do you sleep?" "Short naps allowed," Grace replies. And the room laughs with the gratitude of people who didn't know a policy meeting could make them feel like rooms instead of boxes. When she slips back into Wellness 2, the kettle is still warm and the bead necklaces have multiplied. There's a blue one draped over the lamp like a crown. Margaret is awake, eyes on the tree. "How did they take your sentences?" she asks. "They fed them cookies," Grace says. "They'll live." Damian leans in the doorway. "We made a thing," he says. "It's not perfect. It's a good start." Margaret nods. Good starts make middles possible. Grace sits on the edge of the love seat and fishes a soft ball from the basket. "Exercise time," she declares gently, and they do the squeezes together. Squeeze, breathe, release. Hands obey structure more willingly when someone else is also obeying structure nearby. Midway through, there's a knock that sounds like apology. Maria peeks in, holding a small plastic container like a peace offering. "I bring flan," she says, embarrassed by generosity. "For Miss Margaret, for her hands." Grace beams. "For her hands," she echoes, and Margaret claps once, the soft, delighted kind of clap that toddlers in Queens share. They eat flan with plastic spoons, as if it were a sacrament. Maria hovers until Grace pulls a chair in and makes hovering into sitting. "Schedule time," Grace says, sliding the booking app open on her tablet. "When do you need the room tomorrow?" Maria blinks. "Tomorrow?" She wasn't ready for easy. Then she nods. Brave. 11. 11 is blue, Grace says. Booked. At 4:10, the day tries to be dramatic. An email from comms, press request from National Morning Show. They want a segment on corporate caregiving with you and Damian tomorrow. Grace feels the administrative part of her brain do a backflip and land on both feet. "No," she writes back. Then she deletes "no" and types, "Not yet. We're building the thing. We won't tour it half-baked. Offer a written Q&A next week after we publish the policy and run manager training has-own. Human stories, not a spectacle. If they insist on cameras, we'll suggest they film the mural, not faces." Comms replies with a grateful gif of someone putting sunglasses on a cat. Translation: "Thank you for giving us a spine we can point at." At 4:30, Damian has one more board call on the calendar, one-on-one with a director who is less chair, more chair adjacent. Grace joins because she's started to believe in the power of quality witnesses. The director surprises them. "I wanted to say," she begins, "my father raised me while running a small manufacturing plant. He used to bring me to the office on Saturdays because there was nowhere else to put me. I did my homework on a break room table. He taught me more about inventory than my MBA did." She clears her throat. "I think the policy is right." Damian takes a beat. "Thank you," he says, and it's the kind of thank you that acknowledges someone just laid a story on the table and hopes it doesn't fall off. "Send me the draft," the director continues. "I'll help you sell it in the room." Grace catches Damian's eye and does a tiny victory checkmark in the air. He doesn't smile, exactly. He loosens, which is better. The office thins out by 5. People leave in pairs, in trios, in strings of one. Grace walks the mobility route one more time because habits are scaffolding. She straightens the care in progress sign, flips the kettle switch off, tucks the bead baskets into a corner where they're easy to find and hard to trip over. She writes, "Thank you," on a post-it and sticks it to the facility's work order for the small ramp that arrived like a quiet hero. Margaret is tired in the way that means satisfaction more than depletion. "Did we do the day?" she asks. "We did the day," Grace says. "The day did not do us." Is. Damian gathers the bag, the same good intentions folder, now with copies of exercises and a schedule printed in a font that respects eyes. They make for the elevator together, a trio that is starting to feel like a team, which is different from a family and also a kind of family. At the doors, the mirror reflects 3 versions of steadiness. Margaret leans slightly toward Grace without leaning away from Damian. Grace stands with her hands visible, the caretaker's hands Margaret named. Damian's jaw looks less like a fortress and more like a promise. In the car, Margaret yawns a delicate yawn into the shawl. The driver secures the chair with the practiced tenderness of someone who has decided professionalism and care are synonyms. Grace checks the buckle, the blanket, the angle of the seatbelt where it crosses a collarbone. None of this is dramatic. All of it is love. "Tomorrow," Damian says, hand on the doorframe, "we publish a draft." "Tomorrow," Grace echoes, "we publish a draft and don't call it a pilot." He smiles for real. Phase 1. Phase 1, Grace confirms, like a toast. She watches the car pull away, then stands for 1 extra second, letting the evening collect itself. Inside, the lobby mural holds the day in a glaze blues, deepening with the dimming light, charcoal almost letters leaning toward legibility, and then refusing because some truths prefer the slow reveal. On her way back through the lobby, the junior analyst coffee forgetter turned nodder catches her eye. "Miss Park," he blurts, flushing, "I blocked out 20 minutes for my grandmother's call tomorrow. It's on my calendar. I wrote care window instead of personal errand." It felt bigger. Grace grins. "It is bigger," she says. "Good word choice." He nods and looks like he might run a lap around his own decency. Back at her desk, she pulls out the River Rulebook, working draft, and adds 3 lines. 7. Say the truth in subject lines. 8. Phase 1 is more honest than pilot. 9. Praise people for using the room. She caps her pen, and because her grandmother would insist, she says out loud, to no one and to the building, "We do not whisper care here." The sentence sits on the air like it's exactly where it was meant to be. At home later, she'll set the folder on her table and, without trying to make it art, she'll sketch a button board and 2 hands that aren't quite aligned, one labeled in small script Margaret, one Lily. She'll add a 3rd outline that shares the space without needing a name. She'll color the background lightly in blue, then stop, because restraint is also a color. Her phone buzzes while the kettle in her own kitchen decides to approve the water. "Damian, draft looks strong. Let's ship internally at 10 a.m. tomorrow." I added 3 words to the opening line. A screenshot follows. He has written, "We do not whisper care here, on purpose." Grace laughs, startled and pleased. She texts back, "Keep the 3 words. They say we're not apologizing." Maria texts a photo of her mother smiling in a chair with a mug of tea that's too big for her hand. "She likes the blue sign," the message reads. "She says it looks like the sky when it remembers where to go." Grace replies with a heart, and then, because she can't help it, with a door emoji. Door stops, river rules, blue name cards, short naps, draft shelves and creator dashboards, managers unlearning euphemisms, architecture, all of it. When she turns off her lamp, the city still has its habit of pretending it's louder than hearts. It isn't. She knows better now. The river in the lobby will be there in the morning, and so will the people who walk past it differently than they did last week. Choices stack. So do rooms. So do hands, one on top of another, stubborn in the direction of care. Let me level with you before we dive in. Sometimes a day doesn't break, it splinters. It starts clean enough. 10 a.m. The company-wide goes out. "We do not whisper care here." On purpose. Manager invites queued, room signs printed, the care windows booking flow live on the intranet with a banner that looks like a friendly blue river instead of a warning label. Grace stands by the printer like she's midwifing a small civilization, catching pages before they jam, stacking them into tidy piles that smell like ink and intention. HR has turned Wellness 2 into a demonstration set for 15 minutes. Here's how to book the room. Here's how to shut the lamp if the day is too loud. Here's the polite way to explain boundaries when someone treats care as contagious. People file in 2 by 2, a little awkward, a little grateful. Someone asks if the tea is free. Grace says, "The tea is a policy," and they laugh like relief. Damian does a walkthrough with facilities, a thing CEOs rarely do unless they're trying to look like they care. He isn't trying. He's learning what he needs to know. He grips the door handle the way he grips numbers, checking for where they stick. He tests a threshold with his shoe. He's in his shirt sleeves because rolled up looks less like ceremony and more like, "Let me lift that." "Draft shelves?" he asks the product lead in the hall. "Live?" "Live," they reply. Creators see a banner. "We'll hold your place." We added a quiet minutes meter too. You can add time to a buffer without losing streaks. "Good," he says. And it lands like a pat on a shoulder and a green light in the same syllable. Margaret arrives just before 11. shawl draped, eyes bright with the kind of sleep that visits you on purpose. Grace meets them at the elevator and can tell by the way Margaret grips the armrest that the morning took its vitamins. Blue name cards, Margaret says, as soon as Wellness 2 comes into view. Waiting, Grace answers, and flips Margaret to the front like a magician who likes predictable tricks. They settle. The kettle plays its single note. Grace passes the soft ball. Damian takes the button board. They are a choreography, now squeeze, thread, breathe. Margaret tells a story about a river that flooded the town when she was a girl, and how the adults were angry at water for remembering it was stronger than concrete. Everybody wants the world to behave like a hallway, she says. But it's a river. Write that down, Damian tells Grace without looking up. I already did, she says, pen moving. At 11:17, the first email lands. It looks harmless. Care Windows clarification request. It's from a manager who's good at product and bad at people. Does short nap have a minute limit? He writes. Also, chosen family creates ambiguity. Our lawyers. Grace breathes, answers without flint. Short enough that the workday still recognizes itself. Long enough that a human does, too. Chosen family. The people who would pick you up from an airport or a hospital. If you need a lawyer to tell you who that is, you need a hug first. She deletes the last sentence. She leaves. Chosen family equals the people who do care with you. We'll train on the rest. At 11:31, the second email. Subject: Great policy. Quick press request. A national business site wants a quote. Comms filters, as agreed. Next week, after training, has shown. Grace replies with the plan, and a thank you bigger than the no. At 11:42, the third email. Urgent. Board call at noon. Grace's phone vibrates with the calendar hold dropping onto Damian's day like a sandbag. The chair has summoned. The subject line says, reputational considerations immediate. She doesn't say what she's thinking, which is, reputation is just truth wearing a tighter dress. She walks Damian to conference C and sets the room the way you set a stage when you trust your actor. Water. 3 bullet points on a sticky note. Values is greater than optics. Phase 1. Not pilot. Truth. Plain voice. And a chair that doesn't make a moral statement every time you shift. The call begins with the chair's sigh you could upholster a boardroom in. We're receiving mixed feedback, he says. Some positive. Some, skeptical about operational impacts. A donor called the policy a slippery slope to people bringing private matters into professional spaces. Damian is steady. We are people, he says. The slope was always ours. A director, the one who did algebra at a break room table, backs him. We can measure impact, she says. Absenteeism, retention, satisfaction. And we can measure decency. Another director wants safeguards. Legal assures there are guardrails. It's a symphony of metaphor until Grace breaks the spell with plain. We built a door, she says. We added a doorstop. We taught people how not to slam. The chair tries the compromise tone that worked for him in 1998. Can we at least align on messaging before further public commentary? Last night's remarks were off script. Damian's voice doesn't sharpen, it clarifies. There isn't a script for telling the truth, he says, and if there were, I wouldn't read it. The call ends with something like détente, which in chair speak is, we'll try to win at the next meeting. Grace collects the sticky note, the empty water glass, the residue of the word slippery, and decides to wash it by saying Phase 1 out loud until it squeaks. Noon brings sandwiches in triangular compliance. Margaret naps, hand on the bead rope like it's a railing. Grace answers 3 more emails that are really confessions. My wife has dialysis Mondays. I didn't know I was allowed to say that. My brother's disability paperwork keeps me on hold every Thursday. I've been taking PTO to hide it. My kid's school calls me at 2:10. I've been pretending it's a vendor. She replies to each like she's handing someone a map they can fold into a pocket. At 12:37, the day tilts. It arrives in the form of a text, not from a number Grace recognizes, but with a name that makes her stomach learn a new gravity. Hi. My name is Ava Harmon. I think your Mr. Hale's mother is my aunt. She reads it twice. Harmon. Lily Harmon. The sister that floats in and out of Margaret's sentences like a boat that forgot to tie itself up. Grace looks at the sleeping woman on the love seat, the blue cards, the shawl tucked at the shoulder with a neatness that loves her, and then she reads the message again, all the way to the end. If you're who to contact, I found the gallery photo online. The river piece, the hand. I know that hand. I know the way she holds her wrist. My mother used to hold hers the same when it shook. My mom, Lily, died 5 years ago. We thought Margaret died 10 years before that. We were told. But that's her, I think. If I'm wrong, I'll disappear. If I'm right, I don't know what to do with breathing this hard. Please. Grace feels the room change shape, though no furniture moves. The mural in the lobby is suddenly in the room, the charcoal almost letters pushing toward legible. She does not answer immediately. She does what she does with anything that could tear. She prepares the edges. She forwards the text to Damian with a single sentence. We need to talk before I reply. He appears at the door so fast, it's as if the building has learned shortcuts under his shoes. She shows him the screen. She says nothing. Saying nothing, right now, is respect. He reads. His jaw does 3 small things, tightening, remembering, and loosening. He sits in the chair beside the lamp like gravity chose him. My mother had a sister, he says, not a revelation but a sentence being held like glass. We never talked about. Not since I was a kid and names got heavy. My father. He stops, because that river is a different episode with different rocks. He looks at Margaret as if she might wake and hand him a map like the ones Grace prints for other people. She's sleeping, Grace says, because asking the sleeping to explain steals from them. We can't ask her to carry this right now. He nods, and the nod is gratitude for rules that keep doors from slamming into heads. If it's true, he says, if there are people who thought she was gone, then there are 2 griefs, Grace says gently. Theirs for losing her, yours for the story you were told. Why would someone say she died? He asks, the way people ask when they're actually asking, did I miss something that big? Grace thinks about secrets with polite names, protection, privacy, and propriety. Because there are places that punish the truth with shame, she says. Because choosing to forget is easier to administrate than learning to remember in public. He breathes. The breath sounds like a wall discovering it was a door. What do we do? He asks. And for a second he's not Mr. Hale or the name on the glass. He's the boy who counted thunder and hoped math could negotiate with weather. Grace's rule book writes itself a new line. When the truth knocks with a trembling hand, open slowly. Offer water. She types back to Ava. Hi Ava, this is Grace. I saw your message. Thank you for reaching out gently. Can you share 2 things that would help us confirm safely? A photo you have of your aunt from before, and anything that might be uniquely her, something only family would know? We'll move with care. No sudden doors. 3 dots appear. Disappear. Appear. Disappear. Then a photo arrives. It is a woman in her 20s next to a river that is real and not a painting. The blue is sky this time. The hand is on a railing, and the wrist is bent in a way that makes Grace's own hands want to mirror it. The face is Margaret's from a time before Grace knew her. Another photo. 2 young women on a couch with a piano behind them, sheet music sliding like unkept promises. A caption typed years later on a phone, Margaret and Lily, rehearsing or pretending to. Then a line of text. She always painted hands with rivers. She said, faces lie, hands confess. She once hid a signature under blue because she thought her name took up too much space. Grace scrolls back to the gallery piece in her head, blues layered, almost letters. A small buried handprint you only see if you stand at the right angle with the right kind of wanting. She looks at Margaret, at the bead rope like a story thread in her fingers. She looks at Damian. He is looking at the photos like he's trying to reconcile two true things that forgot how to share a shelf. "Do we tell her my mother's name here?" he asks. "Or the name the world might know?" Grace doesn't rush the nouns. "We ask Ava what she called her," she says. "Then we ask your mother what she wants to be called when she wakes. We make room for both. Names are chairs. We can put out two until one fits." Seconder. "Who will?" He nods. It's a nod that trusts her hands with something braver than logistics. Grace types again. "What did you call her?" "Ava. When I was little. Aunt Mags." Later, when she pulled away, my mother called her Margaret, in a voice that made the name a door nobody could knock on. Grace feels the sentence land where names sit in the ribs. She replies, "Thank you. Can I ask, how did you find us?" "Ava. The gallery's Instagram. My friend sent it." "This looks like your family's blue," she said. I thought she was being poetic. Then I saw the hand. The hovering last night. The way Margaret lifted her fingers, almost touching. Grace hears the rulebook again. Hands confess. She breathes and chooses the next right. Small thing. "We'd like to talk," she writes. "Not today. Today is soft. Could you come tomorrow? Or we can arrange a call. We'll protect your privacy. We'll protect hers." A beat. Then, "Tomorrow, I'll bring tea cakes she liked. If it's not her, at least someone will eat them. If it is, I don't know what to do with if it is." Grace types, "We'll figure out if it is, together." She adds directions and a time that avoids the office's loudest hours. She signs it with her name, not her title. When she looks up, Margaret is awake. Her eyes are clear in the way air gets after rain. She sees Damian first, then Grace, then the photos on the phone that Grace didn't succeed in hiding as gently as she thought. "Who's visiting?" she asks, like she's entering a conversation mid-bridge. Grace chooses softness and truth at the same time. "A young woman named Ava," she says. "She thinks she might be your niece." Margaret's face does not break. It opens. She touches the bead rope. Her hands are still, and the stillness is louder than the tremor. "Lily's girl?" she says, not a question. Then, like a confession you say to a wall you hope will keep a secret and a promise. "I told everyone I was gone, so I could be gone. It worked too well." He's won. Damian sits, because standing is a lie in this room. "Mom," he says, and his voice remembers every boy he ever was. "Why?" She considers. It is not the frozen kind of considering people do when they're trying not to be wrong. It's the kind you do when you want to be precise with pain. "Because names can be cages," she says. "Because your father didn't like the way I bent toward rivers and art and sisters and anything that made noise in rooms that weren't about shareholders. Because sometimes forgetting is the only kindness a town will allow you to give yourself. I thought, if I erased myself, I could stop taking up space that cost other people's patience." A days. She looks at him the way a painter looks at a blank space on a canvas, measuring what it can hold without lying. "I was wrong," she says simply. "I became a rumor I couldn't correct. The room holds that like a bowl." Grace doesn't try to catch it. She lets it sit in the shape it needs. Then she says, "Because someone has to say it, Ava is coming tomorrow, if you want." Margaret's mouth does a small, brave thing that is not a smile. "Make tea," she says. "Put both names on the table. If Lily wants to come with her, we'll save a chair." Grace squeezes the soft ball once, like a seal. Damian nods. His eyes are wet the way metal gets wet and doesn't rust because it decides to stay useful. "Okay," he says. "Okay." Outside the window, the supervising tree does a wind shrug like, "Yes, this is how branches live, reaching in many directions without apologizing for any of them." The rest of the afternoon is the kind of busy that tries to pretend it's normal. Comms drafts a social post for next week about care windows. Grace edits out 3 words that sounded like marketing and replaces them with one that sounds like a door. Maria stops by to say she booked Wellness 1 for her 11 o'clock tomorrow. A junior engineer sends a photo of a calendar that says Care Window. Grandma Dominoes. Grace reacts with a domino and a heart and a door, because apparently that's her emoji vocabulary now. At 4:03, the board chair sends a new email with an attachment labeled Talking Points Reputational Q&A. Grace opens it, reads 6 bullet points that spin truth like cotton candy, and closes it before the sugar gums her teeth. She forwards it to Damian with, "We can't read this on camera. We'll choke." He replies, "Agreed. No cameras. Not yet. Only rooms. Only people who bring tea cakes." At 4:27, the culture editor who had kind eyes sends a note. "We're doing a longer piece on caregiving and art." Off the record, last night looked like a room remembering how to be a room. If there's more to the story, tell it when it's ready, not when we are. Grace writes back, "Thank you for knowing the difference." At 4:51, Grace prints 2 new blue cards. She writes Ava in a neat hand. Underneath it, smaller, Lily, in case. She tucks them into the folder with care loud. She writes a post-it, tea cakes, plates, napkins, that don't feel like sandpaper. She adds, "Tell security. Guest at 10:30. Welcome like a room, not a checkpoint." When it's time to leave, the building forgets to be a building. It's a ship. It's a gallery. It's a family that refuses to choose between blood and design. Grace walks the corridor with the sign that says, "Care in Progress," and thinks, not for the first time this week, how good it feels when a hallway remembers it can be a river if it wants to. At the elevator, Damian pauses with his hand on the wheelchair handle. "Thank you," he tells Grace again, but this time the thank you has specific gravity. For the texts you answered with the right verbs, for the doors you propped without bruising fingers, for teaching me that phase 1 can hold a person, for not making me choose between truth and schedule. "Tomorrow," he says, "might change a lot." Grace nods. "Rivers do that to maps," she says. "We'll redraw." "Brother." He smiles, a tired smile that does not apologize. The doors open. The mirror returns the 3 of them in neat rectangles, and for half a second, the reflection flickers the way light does when it hits water. And Grace could swear there are 4. She doesn't say it out loud. Some foreshadowing you let hum. Outside, the car is a patient animal. The driver arranges the ramp. Margaret settles. Before the door closes, she reaches for Grace's wrist, feather light, anchoring. "Blue cards," she says. "Ready." Grace answers. Back upstairs, the lobby mural holds the last light of the day like a promise caught on a nail. Grace stands in front of it the way you stand in front of a good question. The charcoal almost letters aren't letters at all. They're paths. If you squint, you can see names. If you stop squinting, you can see hands. Her phone buzzes one last time. It's Ava again, a message sent after hitting send on Courage. "I'm outside your building. I thought I should see the lobby so I don't get lost tomorrow. The river, does it change at different hours?" It looks like it remembers a different story at 5 p.m. Grace glances at the mural and replies, "It does. It will remember you tomorrow too. If you're okay, step in." The guard is kind. "Tell him you're a river scout." He'll smile without knowing why. A typing bubble. Then, "I'll wait for tomorrow. If I see the room now, I'll cry in the wrong day. Thank you. For being," who's the word, "steady." Grace pockets the phone, allows herself exactly 1 deep breath and a small, unshowy smile. She turns to go but freezes at the front desk because the guard is waving like someone who's trying to get a friend's attention without scaring a deer. "Miss Park," he says quietly, "there's a courier for Mr. Hale. No return address. He said it was time-sensitive." "Now?" Grace asks. "5 minutes ago," the guard says, apologetic. "I tried to call. You were with the river." She signs for the envelope. It's heavier than paper deserves to be. Inside, a thin old ledger wrapped in a cloth the color of dusted sky. On the first page, a name written twice, the second time crossing out the first. Emily Cole, over Margaret Hale. A note slips free, handwritten in a careful, unfamiliar script. Art belongs to the truth that survives it. She left more than a rumor. If you're going to say her name, say all of them. There is no sender. There is, between page 3 and 4, a pressed blue petal that breaks when she breathes on it. Grace closes the ledger with both hands, like she's closing a bird gently back into rest. She looks at the mural and thinks about how rivers split and meet again and still find the sea. Tomorrow, a niece will bring tea cakes and questions. A company will have to decide whether a policy is a press release or a door. A mother may choose a different name, and a son will have to learn how to love that truth out loud. The board will want to proofread the tears. The artist might show up with a story the canvas refused to keep to itself. The past has started sending mail. For tonight, Grace takes the ledger to Conference C and slides it into the drawer where they keep the extra markers, the good ones that don't squeak. She labels a fresh blue card with a word she has